And we're going to share the screen. Okay, here's the Mishnah. The Mishnah, this is from the Talmud. Okay, so we have the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah as follows. In a case of one who deposits produce with another, even if it is lost due to spoilage or vermin, the Bailey may not touch it, as it is not his. So Richard has produce. You're going out of town. You ask me to guard your produce. I say, no problem. I put it in my basement, my cellar. I come into my cellar. I see the thing is rotting. So the first opinion, they call it the Tanakama, the first sage of the Mishnah, unnamed. Usually the halacha follows. Well, it depends. In many cases, it follows the unnamed person, but it depends who he's arguing with. But in any case, in this case, so the first opinion is don't touch it. It's rotting, doesn't matter. It's none of your business. You do not touch it. That's the first opinion. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says he sells it before the court, as by doing so, he is like one returning a lost item to the owner, since through its sale, he prevents the owner from losing the value of his produce. So the argument of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon the son of Gamliel, is very interesting. Who gives you permission to sell the person's produce without his permission? Don't touch the other person's produce. That's what the rabbis say. That's what the first opinion says. The first opinion says, don't touch the produce. No one authorized you to touch the produce. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says something very interesting. He says, one minute. He says, don't you remember that there's a mitzvah in the Torah that if I'm walking down the street and I see your lost object, or a donkey or a garment or produce, I have to step in, I have to take possession of it and return it to you. We don't say, it's not yours, don't touch it. We say, return a lost object. Now, what's the difference? Here you have your object, it's sitting in my basement, it's rotting. So shouldn't that same logic apply, that I have a mitzvah to sell my produce and sell your produce and then give you the money? At least I'll stop the rotting, I'll stop the depreciation of this object. So this is the disagreement between the first opinion in the Talmud, the first opinion in the Mishnah, and the second one, which is Rabbi Shimon, the son of Gamliel. If anybody has any preference, who you would go with, you let me know. Now, it seems to be saying, so let me know if you want to jump in and tell me what you think, who you prefer.
One question, Rabbi.
Yes.
When they say it's not your business, what are you interfering for? As opposed to, well, you see something that you know you can rectify and correct. Here's the dichotomy there. If you mind your business, it's not your business, then it's fine. But are you going to go around, on the other hand, are you going to go around and making corrections and returning things every day, every time you see a couple of things throughout the day? You won't get to do your own business.
Okay, so you're raising a separate question, which is, what's the limit on the responsibility to stop what you're doing and return someone else's lost object? Because the Torah says that you cannot ignore. Lo tuchali talem, you cannot ignore. If you walk down the street and you see a wallet on the floor, you can't say, oh, I have a busy day. The next 3 days of my calendar is busy, so I'm going to leave the wallet on the floor. No. Torah says, do not ignore it. You have to stop, take possession, and then try to return it or try to hold on to it, whatever the case is. So Richard's asking a question, what happens if I'm walking down the street and I see an ox and the ox is lost? Now, for me to stop my business and take the ox and lose my money trying to spend my day returning this ox, so I'm taking a loss. So the answer is that there's certain cases certain times you don't have to return the ox, and there's parameters of the law. If you make more money than this is worth, in other words, it all depends. The short answer is it depends. Let's say you make you make $500 an hour, and the ox is worth $500. The ox is worth $200. Okay, so you're going to take a loss by returning the lost objects. You don't have to do that. Let's say the ox is worth much more than what you make for that time. So then you return the ox, but that person has to reimburse you for your time. right? So the
Yeah.
answer is that, yeah, there not always do I have to stop what I'm doing and return lost objects all day. But in principle, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel seems to be making a very good argument. The principle is that as Jews, when we see some lost, some damage coming to somebody else, we have to step in. By the way, it's not written in this Mishnah, but the Talmud often says that the same principle applies not just to a lost object. Let's say I see a flood coming to your house or damage coming to your house, and I see that you forgot to close your door. So I have an obligation to close your front door to prevent the damage from coming. And the Talmud says it's the same logic as a lost object, right? If you lose your object, I have to stop what I'm doing and return it. So to prevent a loss, it's the same concept. Preventing a loss is the same concept as returning a lost object. That is the opinion of Rab's second opinion, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, which therefore says, if you give me the produce and you go out of town and your produce starts rotting, I should sell the produce to stop the loss. That is the second opinion. And seemingly, the second opinion makes more sense for those reasons, because the Torah, we already understand that the Torah says, step in to prevent the loss. So now the question becomes, and that's really what the Talmud is going to ask. The Talmud starts with, what's the reason of the first opinion who says, don't touch the produce? And here we're going to have two reasons. We're going to have a psychological reason, and we're also going to have a legal reason. Sort of legal, but it's more like a religious law, a ritual reason. We're going to have both of those reasons. Later, we're going to see the parameters of this disagreement, and then we'll try to figure out which reason is the right reason. Okay? So, if anybody wants to step in and be brave, what would be the reason to say you shall not sell? Again, especially now that Richard points it out, that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel himself points it out. He says, we have a precedent that you have an obligation to step in and save someone else's property. So what would be the reason to say, this case is an exception, somebody gave you produce, it's rotting, do not sell the produce, rather wait for him to come, let it keep rotting? What would be what would the possible reason for that be? So that's a Talmud's question. Says the Talmud, the Gemara, what is the reason that the first Tana said that the Bailey should not touch the produce? Rav Kahana says, this is based on the principle, and this is a psychological principle, which is absolutely fascinating. Later, the Talmud is going to amend it a little bit, but so far it's very interesting. A person prefers a kav of his own produce. A kav is a certain measurement. We discussed on the first page of the tractate Elu Mitziot, we discussed the idea of how much is scattered fruit. We said 1 kav and 4 amot, and the Maimonides had their whole thesis on this of solving the teku, but used the same measurement of kav. So you have 1 kav so that's a kav of measurement of produce. Says the Talmud, a person prefers a kav of his own produce to 9 kav of another's produce. This is a very interesting psychological principle. What the first opinion says, Rav Kahana says, a person appreciates the product of their own labor. If you have a tomato that you grew on your own, you would prefer one of those tomatoes that you grew on your own than 9 that you can buy in the grocery store. That's what Rav Kahana says. So Rav Kahana says, this guy, Richard, all winter has been laboring and producing grain. Now it's rotting a little bit. Fine, it's rotting a little bit. So I'm going to be a good Samaritan, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm stepping in, and I'm going to save the produce, and I'm going to sell all the produce and save you a few dollars. Richard's going to come back. Richard's going to say, I don't want the few dollars. I want the tomatoes that I planted. I want the produce that I planted. I invested my heart and soul into it the entire winter. And Rav Kahana has the principle, and it's brought on elsewhere in the Talmud as well, in different contexts, that a person would rather have, so this is a psychological reason, a person would rather have the product of their own effort more than the produce of other people, more than produce that other people gave. That's Rav Kahana's reason. Interesting, psychological. Then we're going to have one more reason. The other reason is more of a technical reason, but you have to understand the ritual law of the time. The law is that a person has to tithe the produce. That's a biblical law in Israel. In the times of the temple, it's certainly biblical. Now it's a debate. But in any case, you're living in biblical Israel, you have to tithe the produce. you're not allowed to eat produce before it's tithed. In other words, you have to give a certain percentage to the priest and a certain percentage to the Levite, and then you can eat, and to the poor, and then you can eat your produce. Okay, that's the law. It's considered a sin, actually a very severe sin, to eat from the produce before you give part of it to the priest. Okay. Problem is, what happens if I'm walking down the street and I have to eat lunch, and I pull out my bread or my sandwich or my orange, and I realized that I never gave, I didn't tithe this, and I don't know exactly how to tithe. I'm too busy to tithe. I don't know who to give it to. So there is a way. It's not preferred way, but there is a way, and the way is I have a box of produce in my house, and then wherever I am in the world, I could say, yes, I have to give 10% of this, or I have to give 10%, approximately 10% of this produce to the priest. So I'll eat this entire apple. And the 10% of this apple that's value is supposed to go to the priest. That will be transferred to I'll gift the priest the bag of produce that I have in my house instead. So in other words, for practical reasons, I would just set aside a basket of fruit in my house. Then I would eat for the next 2 weeks. And all the food I eat, I tithe and say, yeah, the tithing would be that box of produce. And when I get home and I see a priest, I'll give him that box of produce. That's the principle. That's the idea. That was practiced. Says the Talmud. One second. What happens here? Again, this applies in biblical law, biblical times. It doesn't apply today. This line of logic. Richard is traveling. The produce starts rotting. So I say, you know what? I'm going to sell the produce. It will be no longer Richard's. So he'll have $10, but he won't have any produce. Problem is, what happens if Richard now has to eat and he has to tithe? And you know what he's going to do? He's going to say, the produce that's sitting in Menachem's basement is going to be the tithing for the fruit that he's about to eat. Well, there is no produce in Menachem's basement. The produce has been sold. There is no produce. And what's going to happen is Richard is going to eat food that has not been tithed. And that's a severe sin. So therefore, the second reason of the first opinion in the Talmud is, the second reason is, do not sell the produce. Don't sell produce. Produce is dangerous. Maybe other things would be different. Produce, you have a ritual problem to sell because maybe the owner made this produce as designated this produce as tithings for other food that he's going to eat. And if the produce is sold, there's no tithing. If there's no tithing, the person is eating the produce without being tithed, and that's the problem. So again, the first reason was a psychological reason, that the owner would rather have a smaller measure of produce that he himself worked on, rather than 9 times the amount of that he can get for a gift, or buy for a gift, or whatever. The second reason is not psychological, it's simply ritual law. How could you sell produce? It's possible that that selling of the produce will cause the owner to sin, because it wasn't uncommon for people to eat food and designate other produce that they have as the tithing. But he thinks he has produce in my cellar, but now he turns out he doesn't because I sold it. So that's 2 reasons why the first Tana says, first opinion in the Mishnah says, yes, I know generally speaking there's a mitzvah to return a lost object to a friend, meaning to help them, to shield them from financial loss. In this case, rotting produce, don't touch it. That's the 2 reasons. Now we're going to try to figure out the parameters of the law, and then we'll try to figure out which reason is correct, but we'll see how far that goes. Let's see how far we can get. Okay, so the first reason was, Rav Kana says, because a person would rather have 1 kav of his own to 9 kav of another's. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is the one who gives not the psychological answer, but the ritual answer. We are concerned that perhaps the one who deposited the produce rendered it teruma and tithe for produce in another place. Teruma is the gift. It's not tithing. Tithing literally means 10%. So the priest, you wouldn't give 10%, you just give a little gift, any amount is fine. That's teruma, lifting up a portion to the priest. But then there's tithing. Tithing, it depends on the year. One year you gave it to the Levite, the other year you take it to Jerusalem. In any case, that's Ma'aser, that's 10%. So in any case, we're afraid lest the owner designated this produce that's sitting in my cellar as teruma, the gift for the priest, and tithing for produce that he has in other places, resulting in the buyer consuming produce that is truma and tithe inappropriately. Okay, I apologize. What I said is wrong. The problem is not so much, what I said is wrong. I apologize. The problem is not that Richard is going to go and eat produce that has not been tithed. The problem is that you assume Richard has designated these fruits as tithing. I'm going to sell it on the marketplace. An Israelite, a Jew, is going to buy it. A Jew is not allowed to eat a tithing. Only a priest is allowed to. That's the problem. I apologize. Okay, I said it was wrong. What I said was wrong. Okay, so far so good?
So far, so good.
So far so good. Okay. Now, so far we have three opinions. So far we have two disagreements. The essential disagreement is what should you do? The Mishnah says there are two opinions. One opinion says if the fruit is rotting, sell the fruit. I'm sorry, the first opinion says do not touch the fruit, let it continue rotting. And the Rabbi Shimon bar Gamliel, the other opinion says sell it in the court. We'll see later why the court. You can't sell it to yourself because you may stand to benefit. People will suspect you. Sell it in the court. Let the court see that you're selling it for the right price. In any case, sell it. But the first essential disagreement is that the first opinion says someone gave you produce to hold. It's rotting. Do nothing. Do not sell it. The second opinion says sell it. In order to prevent further deterioration, further loss. That was the one disagreement. Now we have another disagreement, which is what is the reason of opinion number one? What is the reason for the opinion that says do not sell? We understand the reason of the person who says sell. He said it himself. He said the reason is because it's like you're returning a lost object. And just like the Torah gives you a responsibility, obligation to return a lost object, which is saving someone from loss. So we see the principle of preventing loss. Again, I'm not going to go into your house and sell your produce. I have no right to trespass. But here you gave me the produce. It's sitting in my basement. I have certain responsibility toward it. It's rotting. I should go sell it. That's what the second opinion is. What's the first? What is the logic of the first opinion who says do nothing? So here we had a second disagreement between Rav Kahana and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Kahana says the psychological reason, you're not helping the guy by selling his produce. Why? Maybe he's going to show up tomorrow. He'll take a little bit of a loss, but he'd rather have his own fruit. He doesn't want the fruit that you get from somebody else. The person would rather have one measurement of fruit that he planted and worked for on his own, rather than 9 measurements that he got from his friend. That's Rav Kahana's principle, psychological principle. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, no, the problem is maybe the owner set aside these produce as tithing. It's tithing. You can sell it to an Israelite. The Israelite will eat it. Very big sin to eat the tithe produce if you're not a priest. So therefore, don't sell it. Okay, so we have two disagreements. We have one disagreement, and then we have disagreement about the reason for opinion one. Now we have another disagreement. We have an opinion. It's not necessarily a disagreement. We have an opinion that limits this disagreement. Now we want to know, is this opinion universal or not? So that's going to be the discussion now. Go ahead, Zach. Any comments?
Yeah, I have another suggestion why we shouldn't sell. It's easy to abuse if you are possible to sell, because I am the one who announces that the produce is rotting, and then I will be charging this guy for the time that I take and for sale, and he'll come back and I say, oh, it was rotting.
Right. So you're basically saying, so you're right. You have a concern. Maybe this Bailey, maybe the guardian stands to gain, and therefore is gonna be biased. Therefore will have an incentive to sell and bill. I don't know that I can solve your concern 100%, but it's clear that the Talmud is well aware of that concern, and therefore the Mishnah says you should sell it in the court. In other words, you need to have the court's supervision of the sale. So you're right. Maybe I'll have some room. I just want to show you that the Talmud is aware of that. So with your permission, I wasn't planning on going there right now today, but I don't think we'll get that far. But with your permission, I'm going to try to find it in the Talmud where he actually discusses it.
Rabbi.
Give me just 1 second, Richard. Give me just 1 second. Um, Okay, the bottom line is this. Yeah, I can't find it right now. The bottom line is this. The bottom line is that if you look at the words of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he sells it before the court, and it's unusual. Usually, to make a sale, you don't have to go to the court. Just go to the market. You'll hold the receipt. You'll show how much it was sold for, and that's it. The court now is going to evaluate how much it was worth at the point of sale, how much you sold it for, if everything was done correctly. And the Talmud discusses that further because there are other cases where you need to involve the court. So again, can I be sure that you don't benefit anything? I don't know if I can do that 100%, but it's nice to see that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is concerned that the Bailey should not profit. In other words, the bigger concern is if he would sell it to himself. Right? You gave me your produce. You come back.
Or to myself, or to the court where my neighbor or my relative is sitting. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. But the court, hopefully, some degree of oversight. Right? It's not up to me.
But also, if I'm the owner of produce, I'm coming back and I'm suing everybody, including court, because I said, I didn't authorize you to sell if it is rotten or not rotten. Why are we making this decision on account of my produce? If I had a problem with this, if I had concerns, I would have put into contract. If there is a problem, sell it.
Yeah, so that seems to be the opinion of the first guy. The first guy says, leave it alone. And we say, what do you mean? I think the Torah wants me to prevent your loss. Remember, I just want to clarify. We're not talking about a case that I go into your house. Right? I can't break into your house and say, "Oi, Zach, all your produce was rotting, so I came in and I liquidated all your produce." You know, that's ridiculous, right? But here, you gave it to me, which means you want me to have some responsibility to protect this, right? That's part of me guarding your produce is protecting against wild animals, protecting against fire. But what about now? You're going to sit and the second opinion says. We assume, wouldn't you want me to prevent you loss? First opinion says, no. You want your own produce. You don't want to be loss prevented. But that's, I think at the first reason, the psychological reason is much broader than just I worked for it, so I want it. Basically, it's saying, don't assume that everything is dollars and cents, that if you save the guy $5, you alleviated all his concerns. No, people want their privacy. They want their private property. They want their work. They want to have ownership, and you can't assume that just because you're saving the person a few dollars potentially that everybody just responds to financial incentives and everything is just boils down to financial loss or financial gain. That's what he's saying. People would rather have their own produce more than 9 times the amount of someone else's. They didn't have, remember, there was no psychology. There was no term for psychology back then. But I think what they're really saying is there are many motivations for people that are not cannot be quantified with just the basic profit. So I think that basically the first opinion. Look, remember, these are the rabbis of the Talmud articulating what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, "Don't touch it," and I think you're comfortable with that. Don't touch it. You're going to save the guy money. Don't touch it. But the other guy says, "Well, it's a mitzvah to return a lost object." Okay, but this is not a lost object. This was entrusted to you to do nothing but guard it. That's what the first opinion says. I think you're comfortable with the first opinion.
Yeah, it's a real pickle. You convinced me. It's not clear.
It's not clear. Okay. Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead.
Okay. There's a variable here that I don't know if we should interject or not. Isn't there some type of, in the code of Jewish law or wherever it is, if you have a product that you know is defective, in this case, spoiling, you should not try to get rid of that.
Yeah,
you should not try to profit. You should not try to profit off of that. If something's not good, you don't want to profit off of that because you're bringing harm or
So we're not talking about milk that's spoiled. We're talking about grain, and grain when it rots, and it always rots. The Mishnah. Look, I'm not in the agriculture business, but there's always the way it erodes. It rots little by little. So I'm not cheating anybody. When I go and I put out my produce in the market, people see right away what percentage of this is fresh, what percentage is a little rotten, and presumably they're going to, as soon as you buy it, you make the flour and the erosion stops. So you can't cheat people as sell it as perfect produce when it's not. But then everyone knew every time, if you're going to sell me a bag of grain right away, I'm going to look to see how much percentage of it is spoiling. And that was just a common thing because they didn't have, they didn't have the technology to keep it fresh for as long as we can. So when in fact, the Talmud has all kinds of formulas. If you sell me 100 pounds of grain, we both understand that a certain amount is going to be rotten, whatever it is, 1%, 3%, I forgot already, and that's okay, and that's part of the deal. If more than that is rotten, then you can negate, then you can pull back. Right? I'm just saying it was very normal that a certain percentage is rotting, and there's a formula, and a certain percentage is acceptable. Beyond that is not acceptable. But the point is, you're right. The point is, I'm not allowed to present this as perfect produce if it's not. Agreed. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to get into an opinion about that's going to limit the disagreement and say in some cases all agree that you have to sell, but it's one opinion. Now we don't know if everybody agrees with this opinion, so we're now going to have to go and check and run this theory by both opinions. So it gets a little bit more complicated. We'll see how long we have. Before we leave, we'll read in the Maimonides. Maimonides is very straightforward and very simple because he just gives us the bottom line and everything is fine. So let's see.
Rabbi,
yeah.
Can I interject the joke right here?
A joke. I've been looking for a joke since this morning. Go ahead.
Okay, here it goes. You might have heard this. I don't know. There are 3 students in a rabbi's class. One student gives an opinion on the question, and the rabbi goes, "You're absolutely right." The second student goes, "Rabbi, I don't think he's right." And the rabbi goes, "You're absolutely right." And the third student goes, "Wait a minute, Rabbi, they both can't be right." And the rabbi goes, "And you're right also."
Okay, sounds good.
So I just it might dovetail into what you're saying here about the right and wrong.
Three layers of disagreement. It's certainly everyone's trying to be right. That's for sure.
Yeah. So Rabbi's okay. Good. Very good. Good.
Okay, let's do one more layer and let's try not to get drowned in this complication. Like I said, we always have Maimonides to ground us, which I'm going to try to do before we depart. Okay, I just got to find the right window here. Here it is. Okay. So we have the discussion. I can't go all the discussion will be here forever, but we'll go to the big idea, the big disagreement here. Oh no, I skipped it. Okay. Rabba Bar Hana. Funny name, Bar Hana. Bar is Aramaic for the son of. So I think it means Rabba, the son of Hana. So we skip his father's name to go to his grandfather's name. That's one opinion. Another opinion is no, the father's name is Bar Hana. So it's just the son of Bar Hana. Whatever the case is, it's a funny name. Rabba Bar Hana says that Rabbi Yochanan said. Okay. What he's trying to do is limit the parameters of the dispute and basically say that in some cases all agree that you may sell. That's his opinion. We'll see later if it's universal or not. So we'll see. Rabbi Bar Chana says, Rabbi Yochanan says, the dispute in the Mishnah is in a case where the produce deteriorates at its standard rate of deterioration. I alluded to that earlier. It was normal for produce to deteriorate at a certain rate. You know, a certain percentage is going to spoil over a certain period of time. Says Rabbi Yochanan, but if the produce deteriorates at a rate greater than its standard rate of deterioration, everyone agrees that the Bailey sells it before the court. So what he just did, what this Rabbi Yochanan just did, he just took the Mishnah, and the Mishnah, the first opinion says, don't touch it, don't sell it. But Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you could sell it in certain cases. If the deterioration is too fast, then all agree that you could sell it. In other words, what he's doing is he's limiting the parameters of the disagreement, and he's saying that there are cases, if the rate of deterioration is more than the norm, he would say everyone agrees that you can sell. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Now, we don't know, does everyone agree with Rabbi Yochanan or not? So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to go back to the true reasons of the rabbis who said, don't sell, which were, number one, a person would rather have less of their produce than more of their friend's produce. That was the psychological reason. The second reason was, don't sell because maybe this is tithing, and you cannot sell tithing to Jews because it would be a sin for them to eat it. And let's see if Rabbi Yochanan's concept that there are cases where everybody says to sell, let's see if that's consistent with those opinions. So that's what we're going to try to do right now. So says the Talmud like this. The Gemara comments, Rabbi Yochanan, who says that if the rate of deterioration exceeds the norm, everyone agrees you should sell. Rabbi Yochanan certainly disagrees with the opinion of Nachman Yitzchak. Let's spell it out. As the concern that the owner might have rendered the produce teruma or tithe applies regardless of the rate of deterioration. The Gemara asks, shall we say that Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with the opinion of Rav Kana? In other words, Rav Kana says, don't sell. Why not? Because a person would rather have their own produce rather than 9 times a friend's produce. I worked for it, I want mine. It's rotting, too bad. I'd rather have a tomato that's mine with half of it is rotted rather than somebody else's that didn't rot. You know, when we grew tomatoes, today we don't because the kids eat it up before it becomes red. You grow your own tomato. I'll take a tomato, even if some of it is rotten, I'll take it and put it in my salad. I would never pick up that tomato from the store. Only because it's mine do I want to eat this one, right? So here, the Gemara seems to be saying that, according to Rav Kana, that a person would rather have his own produce rather than someone else's produce, then obviously he disagrees even with the opinion that says that if the rate of deterioration is more than the norm, you should sell. No, because Rav Kana would still say, I'd rather have my own produce that's rotting than someone else's that's not rotting. So the Gemara answers no. When Rav Kana says that one prefers his own produce, it was in a case where the produce deteriorates at its standard rate of deterioration that he says it. When the rate of deterioration is accelerated, he would agree that the Bailey sells the produce. The Talmud Gemara asks, but didn't Rav Kana say a person prefers a kav of his own produce to 9 a kav of another's produce? This indicates that even if the rate of deterioration was accelerated, one prefers its own produce because 9 times, in other words, I don't mind, so it's 90% more. I'd rather have 1% of mine than 9%. I'd rather have, it's 9 times the amount. So I'd rather take a loss that's 9 times 9/10 of the value, which is far beyond the rate of acceleration. I still would rather have 1/10 that's mine rather than 9/10 that's somebody else's. So seemingly Rav Kana says that you should never sell, but the Gemara says no. The Gemara answers, this expression is merely an exaggeration. And actually one prefers his own produce only when its rate of deterioration is standard. So that's very interesting because now we're limiting the psychological reason. We're saying, yes, I'd rather have my own produce rather than the produce that someone else gives me, but not 9 times the amount, right? I'd rather have, you go to somebody and say, would you rather have $10 that you earned by yourself or $90 that you earned that someone gifts you? So when I was a kid, when I learned the Talmud seems to be saying that you'd rather have $10 that you earned by yourself than $90 that someone else gives you. That's what I always thought, because that's what the Talmud said. But here the Talmud is saying, no, we don't really mean 10 verse 1 verse 9. We basically mean there's an advantage to have your own. But that's an exaggeration. You wouldn't prefer $9 to $1. That ratio is incorrect. It's just an exaggeration. And therefore, if the produce is deteriorating, you give me $100 worth of produce, and the thing is deteriorating fast, much quicker than the rate, Rav Yochanan says that everybody would agree that you have to sell it. That's one point. I just want to do quickly, and we'll get to Maimonides. The other problem is now the Talmud's going to come back and say, no. Everybody agrees with this opinion, even the guy who said that the reason why we don't sell is because maybe the owner made it tithings. Says it's not a problem. Why isn't that a problem? Because if it's deteriorating too fast, what you could do is you can go to the market and sell it only to priests. In other words, there was a price of selling tithe produce. That price was much less than regular produce, because regular produce an Israelite can eat. The tithings only a priest could eat. So the price of tithings on the market is much less because the demand is much less. So the bottom line is there is a way, and the conclusion of the Talmud is that if it's deteriorating fast, everybody agrees to sell. The only question is, are you going to sell it? In the times of the temple, according to one opinion, you would have to sell it not on the market rate, but on the rate of tithings, which is much lower. So that's the conclusion here. I hope it was not too complicated. I do want to read it in Maimonides. It won't take a lot of time. We'll take 3-4 minutes. Then we'll take any questions or comments, but at least we know we're doing a little bit of Maimonides. So this is Maimonides, the laws of borrowers, again, chapter 7, section 1. We're going to do just one section, okay? And you're going to see how that all those 3 arguments, which we skipped some, there's multiple levels, all this is piled in Maimonides in a few short lines. Here we go. When a person entrusts produce to a colleague, the watchman should not touch it, even though its quantity is dwindling and diminishing. That's the first step, right? He rules with the first opinion. He rules it's deteriorating, don't sell it. So that's when I said he rules like usually the halacha follows the Tanakama, the first sage who's unnamed, because it's more unanimous. It's unnamed. That's usually the halacha, unless he's arguing with the rabbis in plural. So here, Maimonides rules like the first opinion, don't sell. However, Maimonides also rules according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, which says that if it's deteriorating at an accelerated pace, then you could sell it. When does the above apply? When it is diminishing at the ordinary rate. That could be expected each year. If, however, the amount is diminishing beyond the ordinary norms, the watchman should sell the produce in the presence of a court. It is as if he's returning a lost object to its owner. So basically now we're using the language of the second opinion. But the point is, Maimonides basically rules like the first opinion, but he accepts Rabbi Yochanan's limitation of the disagreement. So generally the law is don't sell, don't touch, much more conservative than activist. The guy gave you produce, it's deteriorating, do not sell it. However, if it's deteriorating like crazy, then he says you should sell it. And I think the logic is because Zach said earlier that if the owner would want me to sell it, he would put that in the contract. I think the argument would be that if it's deteriorating at a quicker rate than normal, the owner would not have anticipated that because it's not normal. It's not the norm. So if it's deteriorating quicker, then the logic would be, yeah, the owner never told me to sell, but he didn't expect it to deteriorate at this pace. Now, but we also have the issue when he sells the produce, and now the commentaries of Maimonides say, of course, this does not apply today. It only applies in the time where, well, it doesn't apply today. Outside of Israel, certainly, even in Israel, it depends if it's rabbinic or biblical, whatever the case is. When he sells the produce, he should sell it to the priests at the price at which truma is sold, which is the diminished price, for perhaps the owner designated it as truma or terumat meiser for another produce. And basically, what you have here is that entire page of Talmud is formulated very quickly in Maimonides because he rules. He rules again, like the first opinion, which says do not sell. However, he rules according to the limitation of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that do not sell only if it's deteriorating at a normal pace. If it deteriorates at an unusual pace, then you should step in and sell. So it's sort of a compromise opinion. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is a story in short. Thank you for joining. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, welcome. Thank you, Zina. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Be well.
Rabbi.
Take
Have a
care.
good day.
Thank you for the
Okay,
joke.
bye.
Thank you.
Use it. It's yours. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.